Good morning and welcome to Rising. We have just another fantastic show for all of you today. Briahna, what's going on?
Well, Jordan Charrington and Denise Long will weigh in on the media's coverage of the FBI raid on Mar-a-Lago. And we're going to look at the hand Facebook had in a teenager's abortion prosecution. Plus, Tara Palmieri breaks down the significance of the Epstein judge connection that signed off the Mar-a-Lago raid. But first, yesterday's press briefing had reporters asking a lot of questions about Mar-a-Lago and the role the White House played, if any.
Fox reporter Peter Doocy hit Karine Jean-Pierre with the big question of the day. Let's watch that.
Is this administration weaponizing the Justice Department and the FBI against political opponents?
Peter, the president believes in the rule of law. The president believes in the independence of the Department of Justice.
That's a yes or no?
No, that is
White House.
no. It's a yes or a no for you. I'm answering the question. You may not like it, but I'm answering the question, and I'm answering the question, and I'm telling you that we are not going to comment on a criminal investigation. The president has been very clear. I laid out what his thoughts were back on January 7th in 2021 about how he saw the Department of Justice. And I'm just going to leave it there. We're not going to comment from here, from this White House, on a criminal investigation that is currently happening.
Jean-Pierre maintained that the White House did not know about this and was not briefed on it, according to a friend of the show, Philip Wegman. So that, I don't know, is that believable that...
Yes, I think it's perfectly believable, and it's not responsible for all of the reporters that have been speculating to the contrary to do so. What's so odd is her choice of how to answer that question. If she's maintaining that the White House didn't know this raid was happening before it happened, then the question, is the White House weaponizing the Justice Department, is an easy one. No, there was no coordination per her own answer. Moreover, the question is sort of a subjective one. If I say, I think that we should have a $15 minimum wage because there's poor people in America, and you accuse me of like weaponizing somebody's poverty or treating somebody as a prop, that's a subjective statement, and I can genuinely believe I'm saying what I'm saying, and you can believe that I'm doing so inappropriately. So it's weird for her not to be able to say no. Of course I'm not.
Usually the yes or no are like gotcha things, but in this case, she should have just said no. Like, is the Biden administration weaponizing the Justice Department against political opponents? And she made it sound like it was more complicated than yes or no. She could have just said no.
Just say no.
They are not doing that. From her perspective, they're not doing that. Of course, they're going to say they're not doing that.
But this does feel more like just bad comms than necessarily nefarious actions.
You think the Justice Department really did not let President Biden know that they were going to do this?
I don't know. I don't have any reason not to believe that. I mean, what reason would there be?
Does Merrick Garland know they're going to do this?
Well, Peter Doocy should have asked that question.
Right. If the Attorney General doesn't, I would think the Attorney General would know, and he works for, he's appointed by President Biden. This was a big this was a big deal. This isn't a raid like any other.
Ron DeSantis knew as the governor of Florida.
So that he could put out like a militia or something to stop. She's obviously not going to do.
Well, also there is.
No, I did see some speculation like that. Why wouldn't how Ron DeSantis should have sent in the Florida police officers or something.
Well, also, Ron DeSantis has been supportive in his statements, but there's obviously also a conflict of interest if they both decide to run for president. It's not entirely clear how this generalized support for Donald Trump that we've seen from Republicans since this happened yesterday is going to hold as people start to announce their broader political ambitions.
Well, I find it interesting, and I tweeted something to this effect yesterday. Everyone is basically pretending, what they're claiming about this is the opposite of what they actually feel, because most elected Republicans want Trump to quietly fade from the headlines, go away. They know that Trump himself is a distraction. They have winning issues without Trump. Inflation, although things are getting a little bit better. The kind of instability of the Biden regime. They don't need Trump for that. They don't want to malign him. The voters really like him. They just want him to quietly go away. So, and meanwhile, Democrats, and even more so, I guess, the mainstream media, they want Trump to be front page news every single day until we all go extinct. But they're pretending like they think he's this existential threat to democracy, and it would be best if he, snapped his fingers and vanished Thanos style. So what everybody wants is the opposite of what they're saying.
Yeah.
Republicans want him to just go away, but they have to act like this is the greatest injustice of all time. That's very fascinating.
Yeah, well,
no one's being honest with you.
We'll see if they regret what they asked for.
Well, Ducey pressed Jean-Pierre on whether Biden considers Trump a political rival, and she said this.
Do you consider Donald Trump to be a political rival of President Biden?
I'm not going to speak to that from here.
Well, you talk about Trump all the time. So do you consider him to be...
I don't talk about Trump all the time.
Trump certainly considers Biden to be a political rival. Following the raid, Trump released this video on Truth Social.
We are a nation where free speech is no longer allowed, where crime is rampant like never before, where the economy has been collapsing, where more people died of COVID in 2021 than in 2020. We are a nation that is allowing Iran to build a massive nuclear weapon, and China to use the trillions and trillions of dollars it's taken from the United States to build a military to rival our own. We are a nation that over the past 2 years is no longer respected or listened to all around the world. And we are a nation that is hostile to liberty and freedom and faith. We are a nation whose economy is floundering, whose stores are not stocked, whose deliveries are not coming, and whose educational system is ranked at the bottom of every list. We are a nation that in many ways has become a joke. But soon we will have greatness again. It was hard-working patriots like you who built this country, and it is hard-working patriots like you who are going to save our country.
He's running.
Yeah, I mean, he is absolutely running. Well, and I loved all the speculation. I was watching CNN yesterday for the first time in a little while, and the anchor was saying, "Oh, does this mean he could declare as soon as tomorrow or something? He might declare even faster." Like, yeah, we know you want him to. Like, they want him to so badly because they need him. They need him.
Well, yeah.
This pathological kind of Joker Batman sort of relationship that the media has to Trump and colors all of this coverage. All of the coverage you see is of people who are obsessed with him and need him for their own business models.
Yeah, I think that's true. What I noticed when looking at that, not quite an ad, is that he does something smart, which is that he offers an accurate diagnosis, a largely accurate diagnosis of what's going on with America's problems. I would push back here and there. I do think there has been really good reporting about how the coverage of crime has vastly outstripped the crime rates and that there is not the spike that people believe to be happening. But of course, crime is a routine issue that people are concerned about no matter what the context or who the president is. The economy, on and on down the line. No one would quibble with the fact that our education system is not top tier and all the other kinds of things. What I really hope we don't have is another election cycle where everyone points at problems and no one articulates legitimate solutions. Because the problem here is that even though I think that sometimes Republicans have a better diagnosis of what's going on, their voters are not served by people who get up there and just say the other guy is bad and then get into office and do what Trump did last time, which is do very little to actually uplift the interest of working class people. He's been president before, and he can't just rest on the idea that he is going to do something great. He is going to make America great again. He had 4 years to do so, and arguably part of the world that we're living in is a consequence of him having been the most recent person at 1600 Pennsylvania as well.
And that's not like all of those things he mentioned were perfect for the 4 years he was president,
Correct.
and then they suddenly overnight became bad. So.
Correct. Well, News Nation's Dan Abrams and ABC's George Stephanopoulos discussed the raid yesterday and agreed that there has to be more to the raid than what the FBI is leading on.
You have got to believe that the highest levels of the Justice Department signed off on
The White House
this.
says they didn't know about it, but clearly Christopher Wray, the FBI director, would have known.
No doubt Christopher Wray knew about it.
I guess the open question would be, did Merrick Garland, the Attorney General, know about it, or his deputy, Lisa Monaco?
I've got to believe that Merrick Garland knew about this. You have to. I mean, when you're talking about going to the former president of the United States home, the implications are so significant that you have to believe that Merrick Garland knew about it, and specifically that they wouldn't tell the President of the United States about it. I mean, it's for the same reason that Merrick Garland needs to know about it, is the reason that I think they want to make sure that the President doesn't know about it and isn't involved. To send this kind of FBI team to the former president's home, there has to be something more than just a Presidential Records Act violation. They have to know something that we don't know about yet.
And just last night, Abrams assumed that the investigation must be related to January 6th because of this new development.
Republican Congressman Scott Perry of Pennsylvania says tonight that the FBI has confiscated his cell phone. He provided a statement to News Nation that says, quote, "This morning while traveling with my family, 3 FBI agents visited me and seized my cell phone. They made no attempt to contact my lawyer, who would have made arrangements for them to have my phone if that was their wish. I'm outraged, though not surprised, that the FBI, under the direction of Merrick Garland's DOJ, would seize the phone of a sitting member of Congress." Now, here's why this is important. Congressman Perry is a critical player in the January 6th investigation and was a vocal proponent of President Trump's various claims of election fraud. And based on the timing, that leads me to believe that the search at Mar-a-Lago was almost certainly connected to the broader effort to overturn the election and not just some record-keeping violation.
I mean, again, a lot of speculation. We'll see what happens. I mean,
I think that's a good guess, but we don't know. But it's a good guess.
The way the gears are turning, I'm sure we'll find out a lot about this soon. But one part of this that I'm also really curious about is the implication of Joe Biden knowing in advance. People keep asking the question, did Joe Biden know about it? And the subtext that if he did, it was somehow politically directed or politically motivated. But obviously, that's not necessarily true. If it turns out that there was, obviously there was a warrant. There was some underlying evidence that gave rise to the search.
Well, but you know that warrants can be given under the most basic nonsensical pretext.
They absolutely can, but
are routinely for
something was offered up here, and one would assume, and this is what people have been saying over and over again, one would assume that given the high-profile nature of this, that they can't just run ramshod over people the way that they do, who are much less visible and much less powerful than the President of the United States of America. But what is people are, I think, asking these questions without actually putting a finer point on the idea that just because even if Joe Biden did know about it, it doesn't necessarily mean it's politically motivated. At the end of the day, it can be the case that something helps a person politically and also is the right thing to do because there was a violation of the law. And I'm much more interested in finding out this underlying question of what exactly the search was about and what in fact was found, and if it was in fact pretextual or a legitimate search.
That's what we need to know, and it's really all just speculation until we do know that.
Yeah.
If there's nothing more than some records were taken and they were not classified properly, I think everyone's going to say that this was a major breach of the kind of norms of not a former president, going after them, hounding them. Now, of course, Trump supporters called for Hillary to be locked up, but she wasn't. They didn't go after her or do anything.
Does righting the ship require saying that Trump was treated poorly, or does it require treating other presidents and presidential candidates with an even hand? Right. I mean, that's the hard question, because on one hand, if Trump committed very serious crimes, yes, he should be prosecuted. He should go to jail. He should. Only his most ardent, and probably even his most ardent supporters won't disagree with that. They would just contest that whatever the thing is something he actually did. Yeah.
But in theory, I have to presume that almost everyone agrees. If he committed very serious crimes, he should be prosecuted for them and put them in jail. But now there's always that lesser category of procedural nonsense that everyone can be guilty of if they're subject of an investigation, because there's a lot of ways to trip you up, to get you to obstruct justice or accidentally say something wrong during an interview, and then they can prove, but actually you slipped up with your words.
True.
This is something that happens to from people with very little access to legal recourse and people with actually access to a lot of legal recourse.
Stephen Donziger.
Right, all sorts of people. So if it's just that, if they're just trying to screw him on something like that, I think the response is it's reasonable to think that is a major breach of kind of the norms of constitutional democratic governance. But if it's more serious than that, then yes, they need to do something, and that needs to be made clear to the American people pretty soon.
Yeah.
Or else we're just going to have this, constant sort of narrative about, wow, what is going on?
Yeah, it's dangerous.
All right, I'm looking forward to your radar coming up next, Briahna.